Welcome to episode 124 of the People's History of Ideas podcast. Last episode, we began our textual analysis of the resolution of the 9th Congress of the Chinese Communist Party and the Fourth Red Army, known as the Gutian Resolution for short. There's one additional thing on top of what I said last episode that I would like to mention about the Gutian Conference and its significance in Chinese history. While I usually prefer to emphasize the ruptures between Maoist China and China today, it's important to remember that the legitimacy of today's government in the People's Republic of China is derived from the victory of the Chinese Revolution, and that major nodal points in the revolutionary process continue to have resonance there. In November 2014, Xi Jinping held a conference in Gutian to mark what was then the soon upcoming 85th anniversary of the Gutian Conference. And the theme of Xi Jinping's 2014 conference was the importance of party control over the army and the importance of political work within the People's Liberation Army. Then this past June of 2024, Xi held a similar conference in Yan'an, again in order to mark the then upcoming 95th anniversary of the Gutian Conference. So, while Xi Jinping's interpretation of the relevance of the Gutian Conference is probably pretty different from how Mao would interpret its relevance if he were alive today, it's interesting to note the way in which Gutian is invoked in China by Xi Jinping today. Okay, let's jump back into our analysis of the resolution's text. We left off after discussing the section on ultra-democracy, so let's pick up by reading the section about lack of organizational consciousness. C. Lack of organizational consciousness. The lack of organizational consciousness in the party organization in the Fourth Army has many manifestations in various aspects. The most salient ones are the following three kinds. 1. Failure of the minority to submit to the majority. For example, when a motion is voted down, they become very annoyed or even do not sincerely carry out the party resolutions. All such behavior is an example of this type of mistake. The methods of correction are as follows. A. At meetings, all participants should be encouraged to voice their opinions as fully as possible. It should be clearly understood that the rights and wrongs in any controversy should be clarified without compromise or glossing over, in order to reach a clear-cut conclusion. What cannot be settled at one meeting should be discussed at another, provided there is no interference with the work. B. One requirement of party discipline is that the minority should submit to the majority. If the view of the minority has been rejected at the first party meeting, it must support the decision passed by the majority until the convening of the next meeting. It can bring up the matter for reconsideration at the next meeting, but apart from that, it must not act against the decision in any way. What Mao articulates here about the minority submitting to the majority and carrying out decisions that they might have voted against and not bringing up the matter until another meeting is convened is a pretty traditional interpretation of democratic centralist organizational principles. Okay, continuing with the text. 2. Criticism made without regard to the organization. A. Inter-party criticism is a weapon for strengthening the party organization and increasing its fighting capacity. In the party organization of the Red Army, however, many people are not clear about this significance of criticism and wrongly use it for personal attacks. As a result, it damages the party organization as well as individuals. This is entirely a manifestation of petty bourgeois individualist consciousness. The method of correction is to help party members understand that the significance of criticism is to increase the party's fighting capacity in order to achieve victory in the class struggle, and that it absolutely cannot be used as a means of personal attack. B. Many party members make their criticisms not inside but outside the party. The reason is that the political significance of the party organization has not yet become part of the thinking of party members in general, and they therefore do not understand the importance of the party organization, its meetings, and so forth, and see no difference between criticism inside and criticism outside the organization. The consequences of this fact alone will be enough to lead the party onto the road of destruction. The method of correction is to establish the political significance of party organization in the thinking of ordinary party members. This is the only way to eliminate fundamentally all irresponsible criticisms that have adverse influences on the masses and that disregard party organizational discipline. 3. Special treatment of some party members. Some party members do not come to party branch meetings or small group meetings, do not present work reports even if they come to the meetings, and detach themselves in many ways from ordinary party members on the pretext that they are busy. The fact is that they do not want to get close to the masses and also fear the criticism of the masses. The result is that they become separated from the masses and separated from the party. As regards this matter, responsible persons in party branches, instead of rectifying the situation, have shown signs that they are intimidated by these special party members. The causes of this phenomenon. First, the Red Army has always suffered from a major mistake, namely that party organs pay very little attention to the discussion of work relating to military affairs. Consequently, they do not urge comrades responsible for military affairs regularly to submit plans for military affairs, such as training, management, battle, and other plans, and reports to party meetings. As a result, discussions in the party are divorced from military affairs, and comrades responsible for military affairs also forget that they should be guided by the party and should report to the party. As a result, the military work of the Red Army has become a special area of work that is not understood by party organs and ordinary party members. This is not merely a major obstacle to the task of the militarization of party members, it will also separate the party from military affairs, creating the danger of the inability of the party to guide military affairs. Second, because of the above-mentioned major serious mistakes concerning the tasks of the party, some comrades responsible for military affairs have become a special group in the party. At the same time, many comrades responsible for other work have also turned into special persons who do not want to come to party branch meetings and do not speak even if they come. This is one reason why the life of party branches in the Red Army is as abnormal and unhealthy as it is at present. Methods of correction. First, party meetings at various levels, from party branches to the front committee, must all put plans and reports of military work on the agenda for discussion and decision. Second, all party members, regardless of their fields of responsibility, must attend general meetings of party branches and small group meetings and submit work reports, and may be absent only for good reasons. What stands out to me from these parts of the resolution dealing with criticism made without regard to the organization and special treatment of some party members is that despite the high level at which the Chinese Communist Party was operating, in the sense of conquering territory and setting up liberated zones run by people's governments and carrying out land reform, that actually the Communist Party had many of the same problems that much smaller and less significant revolutionary organizations have anywhere else in the world. Problems of organizational discipline, gossip, and criticism outside of proper channels, poor and uneven participation in meetings, failure of responsible people to present their work for discussions to group meetings, and having party members who set themselves above the basic rules and expectations that the party had for its members. On some level, Mao was dealing here with the sorts of problems that any local committee of progressives or revolutionaries might be experiencing around the corner from wherever you are today. Moving on with the text. D. Absolute egalitarianism. 1. Absolute egalitarianism was extremely serious in the Red Army at one time. After many struggles, it has certainly declined to a large extent, but there still exist many remnants. For example, on the matter of allowances to wounded soldiers, there were objections to differentiating between light and serious cases, and the demand was raised for equal allowances for all. When the officers rode on horseback, it was regarded not as something necessary for performing their duties, but as a sign of inequality. Absolutely equal distribution of things was demanded, and objections were raised to somewhat larger allotments in special cases. In the hauling of rice, the demand was made that all should carry the same load on their backs, irrespective of age or physical condition. Equality was demanded in the allotment of billets and the headquarters would be abused for occupying large rooms. Equality was demanded in the assignment of fatigue duties, and there was unwillingness to do a little more than the next man. It even went so far that when there were 2 wounded men but only 1 stretcher, neither could be carried away because each refused to yield priority to the other. All the above examples demonstrate that absolute egalitarianism has not been fundamentally eradicated from the heads of the masses. What is called getting rid of it to some extent is only partial or formal, and nothing more. 2. Absolute egalitarianism is actually, like ultra-democracy in political matters, the product of a handicraft and small peasant economy. The only difference is that the one manifests itself in the political sphere, while the other manifests itself in the material aspect. 3. The method of correction. We should point out in theory that before the abolition of capitalism, absolute egalitarianism is a mere illusion of peasants and small proprietors, and that even in the period of socialist economy, there can be no absolute equality, for material things will then be distributed on the basis of the needs of individuals and their work. The distribution of material things in the Red Army must be as equal as possible, as in the case of equal pay for officers and men, because this is required by the present circumstances of the struggle. But absolute equality beyond reason must be opposed because it is not required by the struggle. On the contrary, it hinders the struggle. This section on absolute egalitarianism is great because of these details that Mao gives about how this problem manifested itself, but I don't have a lot to add to it. This next section is titled Idealist Views, and Mao's terminology here may require a little clearing up. In the selected works, the section heading is changed to On Subjectivism. Here, subjectivism, or alternately being subjective, means getting all caught up in one's personal standpoint or even personal feelings, and not grasping the whole situation and proceeding, or at least trying to proceed, from an all-sided and objective analysis of things. So, with that little bit of a clarifying introduction, I think you can tell what Mao means in this next section. E. Idealist Views. 1. Idealist views are very strong among party members of the Red Army. They constitute a great obstacle to the analysis of the political situation, the guidance of the work, and the organization of the party. The reason is that idealist analysis of a political situation and idealist guidance of work is inevitably accompanied by and results in either opportunism or adventurism. As for the spirit of idealist criticism in the party, loose and groundless allegations or mutual suspicion, the consequence is often unprincipled and meaningless disputes in the party and the disruption of the party organization. Another point that should be mentioned in connection with inter-party criticism, apart from the spirit of idealist criticism, is the spirit of non-political criticism. They do not understand that the main task of criticism is to point out political mistakes, and that pointing out organizational mistakes is only a secondary task. As for shortcomings in personal life and minor technical points, unless they are closely related to political and organizational mistakes, there is no need to be overcritical and to embarrass the comrades concerned. Moreover, once technical criticism develops, the greatest danger is that the attention of the party members will concentrate entirely on routine technical aspects, and everyone will become timid and overcautious and inevitably forget about the party's political tasks. This is the greatest danger. Like the spirit of idealist and non-scientific criticism, the spirit of technical and non-political criticism in the party of the Red Army will certainly lead to, and has already led to, the worst consequences. 2. The only method of correction is to politicize and make scientific the thinking of party members and the life of the party. To this end, we must 1. Teach party members to apply the Marxist method in analyzing political situations and appraising the class forces, instead of making a subjective analysis and appraisal. 2. Direct the attention of party members to social and economic investigation and research, so as to determine the tactics of struggle and methods of work, and help comrades to understand that without the investigation of actual conditions, they will fall into the pit of fantasy and adventurism. And 3, in inter-party criticism, eliminate the idealist and the technical spirit. Statements should be based on facts, and discussion of work should focus on its political significance. Among other things here, I find it very interesting that Mao says that the problem of people evading the discussion of important political topics by discussing technical details has its roots in a fear of facing political criticism. So, if you've ever been in a meeting that was focused on process questions at the expense of dealing with the important matters at hand, you are not alone. The Fourth Red Army did it too. All right, next section. F. Individualism. 1. Individualism in the Red Army manifests itself in the following ways. A. Retaliation. Some comrades, after being criticized inside the party by a soldier comrade, look for opportunities to retaliate outside the party, and one way is to beat or curse the comrade in question. There are many such cases. Besides, they also seek to retaliate within the party. You have criticized me at this meeting, so I'll find some way to pay you back at the next. There are also quite a few such cases. Such retaliationism arises from purely personal considerations. It is oblivious to the interests of the class and of party life as a whole. Such people are only aware of their own existence. Their target is not the enemy class, but individuals in our own ranks. This is a corrosive agent which greatly weakens the organization and its fighting capacity. B. Small group mentality. Superficially, it is an enlargement of individualism, but in reality, it is still the narrowest kind of individualism and has a strong corrosive and centrifugal effect. Small group mentality used to be rife in the Red Army, and although a great deal has been eliminated as a result of hard struggle, there are still remnants and further efforts are needed in the course of struggle. C. The employee mentality. Some comrades do not understand that the party and the Red Army constitute an instrument for carrying out the tasks of the class, and they are part of it. They do not realize that they themselves are the main force in the struggle, but think that the struggle has nothing to do with them. Their responsibility is merely to their superior officers or to organs at party headquarters, and not to the revolution. This mentality of an employee of the revolution is quite developed and explains why there are not many activists who work unconditionally. Unless it is eliminated, the number of activists will not grow, and the heavy burden of the revolution will remain on the shoulders of a few people, much to the detriment of the struggle. D. Pleasure-seeking. In the Red Army, there are also quite a few people whose individualism find expression in pleasure-seeking. They always hope that their unit will march into big cities. They want to go there not to work, but to enjoy themselves. The last thing they want is to work in the red areas where life is hard. The consequence of pleasure-seeking is to care only about personal interests and not to care about the revolution as a whole or about group actions. E. Passivity and going slow on work. Some comrades become passive and stop working whenever anything goes against their wishes. The basic reason for going slow on work certainly lies in individualism and lack of a genuine and clear understanding of one's class tasks. But there are also objective reasons from improper handling of affairs, assignment of work, or enforcement of discipline by the army, by the party and the army. F. The desire to leave the army. The number of people who ask for transfers from the Red Army to local work is on the increase. The reason for this, too, does not lie entirely with subjective individualism. In addition, there are causes residing in objective circumstances, such as 1. The material hardships of life in the Red Army, 2. Exhaustion after long struggle, and 3. The handling of affairs, assignment of work, or enforcement of discipline. 2. The source of individualism lies in influences ranging from small peasant thinking to bourgeois thinking within the party. The method of correction is primarily to make use of education to rectify individualism ideologically. Next in importance is to conduct affairs, make assignments, and enforce discipline in a proper way.
In addition, methods must be found to improve objective conditions.
So Mao describes here a range of ways in which individualism manifests itself in the Communist Party. The most interesting, and for me kind of surprising, of the ways in which individualism manifests itself that he mentions is what he calls the employee mentality. The employee mentality is kind of the flip side of commandism, and it's a pretty common problem in organizations where most of the initiative is taken at higher organizational levels, and people down at lower levels are used to the idea of just being given tasks to carry out and come to realize that no one above them has much interest in their input. Mao takes the position here that this sort of lack of initiative represents a kind of individualism in the sense that people with the employee mentality feel disconnected from the collective struggle of the masses, and because of that, they don't demonstrate the enthusiasm and initiative that they should. Mao notes a couple paragraphs later how improper handling of affairs, assignment of work, or enforcement of discipline by the party and the army can lead to party members becoming passive. But it's very interesting to me how he puts the onus of overcoming the employee mentality on the person with that mentality themselves. On some fundamental level, I think Mao is saying, despite whatever errors may be made at higher levels in the party above the person displaying the employee mentality, it is up to that person to have largeness of mind and understand how they are part of a larger collective struggle, and to take up their full role as part of that collectivity and to find the personal resources to muster enthusiasm and initiative in the struggle, despite whatever commandist nonsense or other difficulties might be coming down on their shoulders from up above. Personally, I would have liked Mao to have expanded on this point because it's both a widespread and a well-disguised form of individualism. Also, in a context where people have to do a lot of following of orders, such as in warfare like the Fourth Red Army was engaged in, it seems like it would be especially difficult to distinguish between an appropriate level of following orders and falling into having an employee mentality. Well, maybe we'll see Mao clarify some of that somewhere else at a later date. In any case, Mao's discussion of the employee mentality as an ideological problem is an early example of one of the important ways in which Mao's conception of socialism and the proper conduct of revolutionaries is at odds with many other communist leaders. There's a powerful current, dominant and sometimes in places, within international communism associated with viewing individual cadres as cogs in a machine rather than as people who should combine individual initiative with participation in the larger collective project of revolutionary change. Later on, Mao will be more explicit in actually calling out and attacking other leaders who don't share his view. For example, during the Cultural Revolution, which involved Mao calling on people to break with the employee mentality on a society-wide scale, one of the major focuses of Maoist criticism of Liu Shaoqi was that he promoted the idea that communists should be docile tools of the party. Okay, moving on with the resolution.
G. The ideology of roving rebel bands. 1. The sources of the ideology of roving rebels in the Red Army are as follows. 1. The immediate cause is that the vagrants account for the majority in the Red Army. 2. A more remote cause is the existence of a broad mass of vagrants in the whole country and in various southern provinces in particular. These two immediate and remote causes have resulted in roving rebel-style political ideology and plans of action in the Red Army. However, large-scale actions of roving insurgents in the style of Huang Chao, Li Chuang, and Hong Xiuquan are impossible in imperialist-controlled China, and especially in a modern China where advanced weapons, hand grenades, steel cannons, machine guns, etc., advanced methods of communication, telephones and radios for military use, and advanced means of transportation, automobiles, ships, and railways, have already been introduced. So the ideology of roving rebel bands naturally cannot become the final forceful program of action of the Red Army. However, its influence still manifests itself strongly in all fields. For example, 1. Some people want to increase our political influence only by means of roving guerrilla actions, but are unwilling to increase it by undertaking the arduous task of helping the masses build up political power. 2. In expanding the organizational line of the Red Army, some people follow the line of expanding the Red Army by hiring men and buying horses, and recruiting deserters and accepting mutineers, rather than the line of expanding the local Red Guards and the local troops, and thus developing non-local forces of the Red Army. 3. Some people lack the patience to carry on arduous struggles together with the masses and only want to go to the big cities to eat and drink to their heart's content. All these manifestations of roving rebelism seriously hamper the Red Army in performing the tremendous tasks imposed on it by the revolution. Consequently, the eradication of roving rebel ideology is an important objective in the ideological struggle within the party and the Red Army. 2. The methods of correction are as follows. A. Transform the incorrect ideas that have their basis in the vagrants in the party through education and eradicate the ideology of roving rebel bands. B. Intensify education among the basic sections of the Red Army and among recently recruited captives to counter the vagabond outlook. C. Attract activist workers and peasants experienced in struggle to the ranks of the Red Army so as to change its composition. D. Create new army units from among the masses of workers and peasants who are involved in struggle.
We actually read part of this section of the resolution and discussed the roving rebel mentality back in episode 114. So let's not spend too much time on it here. But just as a refresher on that topic, one important thing to keep in mind here is that this section of the document is aimed as much above Mao in the party hierarchy as below him. You might recall that on May 25, 1928, the Central Committee had issued a directive titled Outline of Military Work. This directive ordered the Red Army to reorganize itself according to the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom pattern of organization. Later, in his February 7, 1929 letter, Zhou Enlai rescinded that order and said, "You must never follow the ways of the army of the Taiping Rebellion." In the meantime, Mao had not done that anyways, but what was going on was that Lisan and Zhou Enlai had different ideas about what the Red Army should be doing, and as we discussed back in episode 114, Lisan liked this formulation about modeling the Red Army after the army of the Taipings because he saw it as a way of fighting that was matched to China's particular conditions. Clearly, Mao disagreed, and in fact, Lisan's understanding of how the Taipings were organized more reflected his ideologized fantasy about how they were organized than how they were actually organized in any case. By the way, we discussed the Taiping Revolution all the way back in episodes 3 and 4. All right, the final section of the first part of the resolution on correcting erroneous and non-proletarian ideological tendencies in the party is a short one on the remnants of adventurism. H. The remnants of adventurism. 1. Relatively great efforts have been made in the struggle against adventurism in the party organization in the Red Army, but these efforts cannot be described as already adequate. So, though many ideas and actions of adventurism in the Red Army have been overcome, some remnants still exist. The source of adventurism lies in a combination of lumpen proletarian and petty bourgeois consciousness. Its manifestations include the following. 1. Blind action regardless of subjective and objective conditions. 2. Inadequate and irresolute application of the party's policies for the cities. 3. Slack military discipline, especially in moments of defeat. 4. Acts of house burning at the expense of the mass base exist to some extent in all units. And 5. The practices of shooting deserters and of inflicting corporal punishment, of which some aspects also result from adventurism. 2. The methods of correction are as follows. A. Eradicate adventurism theoretically. B. Correct adventurous behavior through rules, regulations, and policies. Okay. Here, too, Mao is aiming both above and below him with his criticism of adventurism. As you may recall, blind actionism is the term that was used for Qiubai's policies of trying to foment armed revolt wherever and whenever possible, regardless of the objective conditions or the possibility for success. In episodes 56 and 73, we talked about this policy, and we also talked about it in some other places too, but those are a couple good ones to go back to. On the burning of houses in cities and the negative effect that had on the communists' efforts at winning support from people whose houses got burned down, The South Hunan Uprising is the big example of that, which we discussed in episodes 81, 82, although Mao also waged a continual struggle to keep his own troops from doing too much unnecessary destroying of private property while he was leading them in the Jinggangshan base area days, as we discussed in episode 92, for example. Some historians have also seen this section of the resolution as directed against Lisan, who will soon, but had not yet, come to dominate the party center, and who will push the Red Army to attack cities that it had no prospect of holding on to. That may well be the case, although at this point Zhou Enlai and Lisan were still contesting the leadership of the party in Shanghai, and none of the orders to attack cities that Lisan would later issue had come down the pipeline from the party center yet. It is possible, though, that Mao had some indication that this is the direction that Lisan would go if he won out over Zhou Enlai. Certainly Chen Yi may have learned that Lisan leaned in that direction during the time he had spent in Shanghai before returning to Fujian with the September instruction, as we discussed in episode 120. All right, that concludes the first part of the resolution, the part titled The Problem of Correcting Erroneous and Non-Proletarian Ideological Tendencies in the Party. Next episode, we'll continue our analysis of the resolution. Until then, be well.